Добро вечер. Ова е визави на програмата на ТВ канал ВИС. Мој вечерашен гостин е амбасадорот на Кралството Холандија во Северна Македонија, господинот Дирк Јан Коп. Господине Јан Коп, добре дојдовте во визави. Прв пат сте во Струмица, во посета на општината и на неколку компании, како и во посета на општина Дојран. Која е целта на денешната посета?
Well, I was appointed as ambassador in North Macedonia 1st of September last year. So I've been here a bit over a year. Of course, I spent the first few months mainly making visits in Skopje, getting to know everybody. But I was planning very soon to go into the country and visit the regions. Also for the purpose of visiting Dutch businesses in this country. The first item in my calendar that was cancelled because of Corona was the carnival in Strumica. I was planning to come at the end of February to Strumica, but now I've decided it's been long enough. I have to visit these regions, and I visited this morning with Dutch companies, Holland Farming, for instance, in Strumica. I will visit a Dutch company later today. So that's the main purpose, but I use these visits to get acquainted with our business, but also to meet local authorities, local media like you, and I give sometimes lectures in universities and visit NGOs with whom we have projects.
Каков е вашиот впечаток за југоистокот?
There is a lot of promise in this region, I think, in the first place for agriculture, also tourism. You have a great climate, you have water. Since I'm here, I've been wondering. The Netherlands is about the same size as your country, but we are the second exporter of food and agriculture products in the world after the United States. So we export more food and agricultural products than, for instance, France or Germany. And given the size of our country, that gives you an idea about the technical level and the intensity of agriculture, because it is only 4% of our economy, and still it has this huge potential. And this is one of the countries in Eastern Europe where I don't see that much Dutch presence. So I think there is a huge potential to increase our agricultural presence in this country that has so much going for it in, as I said, climate, soil, water. And for instance, the company I visited this morning, Holland Farming, is in that area. They distribute seeds and fertilizer, also non-chemical ways of combating pests. Everybody uses chemicals. We use insects to fight insects. So one funny thing is that we import insects into this country.
Што треба да прават малите земји како Северна Македонија за да го развиваат земјоделското производство?
The previous government did quite a lot in reform legislation, but in my language we say paper is patient. I think this government has a lot of ambition to reform further, but in our view it comes down now to implement reform. And not only to get into the EU, but especially for the population. The population has to see that it actually can work on the ground, that reforms that they should restore their trust into the structures of this country. So this is also true in business and investment. The better the rule of law functions, the more investors you will attract. Yeah. People who are afraid to get a heart attack every day when doing business here will not come. They will come when they think the business climate is good. So a lot of that will also now be structured by the negotiations with the EU. That will, to a large extent, determine the agenda of the reform. So the government will be helped by that. But that is certainly also true, I think, for a region like this one that could rely more heavily even on agriculture, the name of the game is level playing fields, equal opportunity, rule of law, not too much bureaucracy in obtaining permits, also not too much local bureaucracy in getting connections to gas and electricity and have a right infrastructure and getting a building permit, the possibilities of buying land. Well, as far as we can see, that is all slowly, but it is on the right track. But in this coming period, also with the start of the negotiations with the EU, that could all still improve much more.
Може ли Северна Македонија да очекува консензус околу преговарачката рамка за влез во Европската Унија?
In my view, it's not the most important question, because it is clear what this country needs to do to get through all the negotiating chapters with the European Union, starting with chapter 23 and 24, which are all about the rule of law and human rights, but there are all the other chapters about the economy and free markets and tariffs and government procurement and what you do about your energy policy and the environment and all these things. It is clear what this country has to do, and it has already done a lot of these things. So even if the exact date of this, what the so-called intergovernmental conference that starts the formal negotiation, even if this date still shifts, which is possible because this is politics. You never know what happens here, what happens in Brussels, what all the member states think. But even if these dates shift a little bit, whether it is this December or maybe February, this process, there's no reason to delay this process. The road to reform is clear. It needs to be done and it needs to be implemented.
Новата методологија за влез во Европската Унија предвидува и добрососедски односи, но Република Бугарија последниве месеци го засилува притисокот врз државата со барања кои силно ја вознемируваат македонската јавност. Може ли да се очекува блокада од оваа соседна земја?
I think this country has made remarkable steps in the past by concluding the Prespa agreement and the friendship agreement with Bulgaria. These two agreements and also the Ohrid framework agreement internally, but these agreements have opened the way for this country to move forward, to move towards membership of NATO, which has happened now, and it has opened the way to become member of the EU, which was approved in March. To stay on that road, North Macedonia needs to solve its problems with its neighbors, and that means implementing these treaties. But that is a purely bilateral matter. This has no influence on the negotiations in Brussels to go through the chapters. So formally, I have no opinion about that.
Вице-премиерот задолжен за европски прашања, господинот Никола Димитров, пред неколку дена рече дека доколку Европската Унија го дозволи условувањето од Бугарија за јазикот, не ја заслужува придавката европска. Како Кралството Холандија, како членка на Европската Унија, гледа на ваквите барања на соседна Бугарија?
I was there when he said it, because we were in Prilep on the 11th of October to put flowers at the monuments, and he said that in an interview on an occasion that very much marks a day of remembrance for what is in fact the start of nationhood of this country. So but I'm not going to comment on that opinion. As I said, the question is being discussed by the two governments of Bulgaria and North Macedonia. It is clear that the German presidency at the moment of the European Council is aiming for a first intergovernmental conference in December or before the end of the year. Discussions are going on about that in Brussels as well, and that is the place where these discussions should take place, and between the two governments. I am in no position to comment on who is right or who is wrong, or.
I know.
But I would think, that's maybe the only thing I can say, that I have noticed since being here that issues tend to become emotional very fast. And I think, I hope that all the sides in this discussion will try to keep a cool head, because we have to look ahead, not too much to the past.
Како го оценувате напредокот на реформите во земјава?
I think a lot of the legislation that is necessary for reform was done under the previous government. We are impressed that since the suspension of Parliament in February and all the difficulties with Corona and the postponement of the elections and the state of emergency and ruling by decree, this country held free and fair elections in July, formed a new government in a reasonable time frame, a government that now seems to have ambitious plans, but not idealistic. It is, I think, ambitious but realistic. As I said, for us the most important thing now is implementation. Make it work on the ground. Show the people what it means to change society, because a lot of it is here, in the minds of the people, in the mentality of the people. And I'm very optimistic that this can work. The people of this country seem to me very forward-looking. They express a desire to become more part of the Euro-Atlantic world. Every opinion poll shows that. It is the stated objective not only of the government but also of the opposition. It needs, my father always told me, everything in life is 5% intelligence and 95% sweat. So yes, it needs a lot of work, and it will take time, but that is what is needed, implementation. Of course, the legislative process has to go on as well, and that framework will be set, as I said, largely by the framework with for the negotiation with the European Union, but the trick is to make it work. And that is not easy, because it will take money, it will take people, office space, IT infrastructure. You will have to put it there. And it will be an expensive year next year, with local elections, with the census in April. So, and there is the Corona, which makes puts a lot of constraints on the economy. So it will be, well, juggling several balls, keep them in the air at the same time. But then again, the EU and the member states are here to assist in that process, and to help where we can, and not only where we can, where we are needed, because it is in the end up to you and your government to indicate to us what you want from us.
Кои се според вас најслабите точки во целиот овој процес?
Well, that, as I said, implementation will be difficult and takes a lot of effort and money. And of course, there are general problems like the emigration of bright young people. There are problems like the difficulty for companies, not only our companies, but your own companies, to find sufficiently trained staff. There are lots of universities, but in vocational and technical training, steps could be made. You don't need a university degree to run a greenhouse, to grow tomatoes. You need a good technical education. Of course, parents are the same. I'm a parent myself. Parents are the same everywhere in the world. We want our children to be doctors and lawyers. But in my country, probably the very rich people are good plumbers and good carpenters.
Холандија работи на повеќе проекти со земјава за исполнување на европската агенда. Може ли да спомнеме некои од нив?
Yeah, currently we have more than 30 projects running, and a main focus is the rule of law. And so we have projects in reforming the judiciary and the judicial council, training judges, training prosecutors. Another field is corruption, anti-corruption measures. We do a lot there as well. We just finished a study that looks at every rule in North Macedonia for public hiring. Doesn't mean everything that is where state money is involved to appoint people, there the rules have to be made uniform to fight nepotism and cronyism and clientelism. That study we just finished and presented it to the new Minister of Anti-Corruption and the Minister of Information, and contains 150 recommendations. But there again, these now have to be implemented. So we do projects like that. We have a project in juvenile detention where we are setting up education for children in prison or juveniles in prison. We are very much involved with the Ministry of Finance because the Netherlands represents North Macedonia in the international financial institutions like IMF and the World Bank and EBRD. So we represent North Macedonia, so we are in close contact with the Ministry of Finance and have bilateral cooperation there. Also, we have just set up a new project in financial intelligence to find the source of money from terrorism and organized crime. So in that area we do projects, so the list goes on. But everything is aimed at creating this level playing field, in making this country ready for the EU, but also we very much hope that the effect will be that the people start trusting their institutions again, because that is maybe the main difference between our system and other countries. A lot of people want strong rulers. We have strong institutions, and people get elected and then other people get elected, but the institutions stay. The institutions are the base of are the society. They are the essence of the society, and that is what going into the EU means for North Macedonia as well. The fabric of society shouldn't not be people, it should be the structures, and then the people will perform their roles in there. One other area where we do a lot of projects now, is now that North Macedonia has become a NATO member, is with the Ministry of Defense, in cooperation, getting North Macedonia to operate professionally in Brussels, because that is also a bureaucracy where you have to find your way. We're helping with that. Also in cooperation in cyber warfare, which is threatening more and more. And of course we're looking at further cooperation. We're thinking about having our special forces be trained in this country.
Да, Холандија ги има едни од најдобрите резултати поврзани со интернет безбедноста.
We're, I think, maybe the first that set up a national strategy in 2012. So we are a front runner in cyber security, not only cyber defense, but also cyber offense, because cyber war means war. And basically, we are at war in the cyber space. Yeah.
Што можат да прават малите земји како нашата за да ги надминат последиците од корона пандемијата?
North Macedonia is doing relatively well in economic terms. A lot of other European countries are much more seriously affected by corona than this. The predictions now are basically 4 to 5% decrease in GDP this year and 4 to 5% increase next year. Net result, no decrease, which is, we would all like to see growth. But no decrease compared to everybody around you is not bad. So there is extensive support from the EU and EU member states and others like the United States. Millions and millions and millions of euros, 60 for the direct effects of Corona. There is another 180 from the EU in the future. Then IPA will kick in, the instrument for pre-accession assistance, now that North Macedonia is on the so. There's also, apart from the economic difficulties, there is a lot of money available for assistance. What do I expect? Nobody knows at this moment. Expectations are, but nobody can be sure, but expectations are that probably a vaccine will be available in the first quarter of next year. That is what it's beginning to look like, but it's very dangerous to say that, because then if it is not February but June, people will say you were wrong. Yeah, I may be very wrong, but let's hope we can all get out of this pretty quickly. Also, so far, North Macedonia has been doing pretty well in combating the effects of Corona. Your health system has not collapsed, but is working and functioning. It is maybe strained, but all our health systems in Europe are strained because of Corona. So your intensive care is coping. There are enough supplies of necessary equipment and medication. So you are not doing too badly. I feel quite safe here. I feel maybe safer here than in my own country, where the figures are rising.
Пред да го заокружиме интервјуто, би сакала да ве прашам како вие го поминувате времето во овој специфичен пандемиски период.
I read a lot and I watch Netflix. No, it is, of course, it is a bit boring. I would like to, when I came here, I had all these plans and I want to do things and I want to be there for the reforms and to talk to the people and the government and the NGOs and the schools and the companies, how we can move this into a better direction. I want to see more Dutch trade and investment in this country. But instead, this whole past year has been largely messed up by Corona and I had to stay home. But I hope very soon we can put a bit more dynamic in this process.
Господине амбасадор, ви благодарам за разговорот.
Thank you.
Почитувани, тоа беше Визави. Разговаравме со амбасадорот на Кралството Холандија во Северна Македонија, господинот Дирк Јан Коп. Ви благодарам за вниманието. Довидување.